I'm going to go rogue on these small cap investors and talk about BHP. That is the stock of the day. BHP, as you probably well know now, is proposed to $39 billion, that's US, takeover of Anglo American, I should say, which would bring together these two global mining companies. It would be, one of the biggest transactions to come out of the mining space in years. BHP says that the combination would optimize Anglo's assets and long-term growth potential with its own higher margin cash generative assets and growth projects, along with its larger free cash flows and stronger balance sheet. Now, we are hearing that Anglo American does not find this takeover offer very attractive. So will BHP have to come back to the table? It's conditional, it's a non-binding offer. That's just some reports coming through from Reuters. What we do know today is that the share price of BHP is down significantly, 4.5%. So let's find out what my guests make of the stock of the day. Guys, I know that BHP isn't the type of company that you would usually invest in. However, is one of the biggest companies listed locally, and what BHP wants are the copper assets from Anglo American because it believes in the electrification of the economy. It believes that we're going to be consuming more copper as India, as China continues to grow their economies as well. So, Luke, I'll start with you. I mean, would there ever be a compelling case for you to invest in BHP?
Not for me personally, Nadine, obviously given the size and the focus of Merewether Capital, but the biggest stock on the index and making an acquisition that is not just a bolt-on acquisition. They bought Oz Minerals a couple of years ago in that copper space. That was about $10 billion from memory. So, that was much more of that small bolt-on. Anglo American would be a top 10 ASX company on its own if it was listed here. This is the potential to be, it would be an acquisition, but more akin to almost a merger. There's a lot going on, as you said. It was sort of reported through the news. Obviously, the market here was closed yesterday, so we're getting BHP's a few more details from BHP today. Anglo American's board doesn't surprise me that their first instinct is to say no. Primary reason is it's an all scrip offer, so no cash, and it'll take a bit of time. Obviously, these two behemoth businesses. The two boards would have to sit down and independently come up with, or BHP's already done this, but Anglo American now sitting down and coming up with a valuation of BHP in its business because you're not just accepting cash for your own. So there's a lot to take in. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, resources isn't my style, as you know, but I follow people who do, and there's a lot of compelling arguments to the long-term thematics of copper and copper demand, and it makes a lot of sense from that point of view, from a resource point of view. I think the market reaction today is more probably the market being a bit apprehensive with regards to BHP's history of M&A. I think you can't fault BHP's management operating mines and the history they've got there, but their history of M&A and it's particularly large ones, and the spin-off of South 32, and there's been a lot of comings and goings, even the coal assets last year, and a lot of people would usually have the view that you would do well to buy off BHP and you do well to sell to BHP. They're often not regarded as at the best of that sort of capital allocation in M&A. So it's probably a little bit of the market shoot first, ask questions later until we see some more deals. I suspect this will be long and drawn out, given it's all scrip. But yeah, I mean, look, for the program today in a buy, hold, sell, I think it's still just a hold. And as I said before, if you take a step away from the financials and the accretion and the two businesses coming together, just from a resource point of view, it makes sense to me. I think copper does have that long-term thematic, and I think it makes sense to lock down. I think they would be 10% of the copper supply I read. So, that would be quite a compelling investment thesis from that point of view.
Yeah, I've had to make these guys do their homework and read the deal because it's not a done deal, but you would think that this was not a move that was taken very lightly by the BHP board. So we don't know exactly where it will end up. But, Claude, do you need exposure to this decarbonization, electrification, thematic megatrend really in your portfolio? And why not go with, one of the world's largest global miners?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so I definitely do like to play this thematic. Obviously, there's many different approaches to investing. One is to cluster stocks around thematics you think are underrated or will last a particularly long time. I actually owned Oz Minerals in 2022 when BHP, took it over essentially, or at least announced the takeover. I think it didn't happen until 2023. So, ultimately, I do like the copper play as well, and I've like copper. I obviously don't buy mining companies very often, and I really want to have like a very simple thesis for it in terms of I don't, want to be doing an analysis of whether a certain mine can become profitable, or I'm not trying to do ahead of the curve exploration stuff. I'm just trying to look at what's the multiple of earnings. Do I think the copper price will go up over the long term? I think, yeah, obviously the copper price has been very weak over the last few years. So that's the kind of time you do want to be buying a copper asset. Now that's the question of the copper asset. Doing it through BHP, that is mostly about iron ore and obviously diversifying into copper. They're acting as an investor there, and maybe that makes sense for the long term good of the company, or maybe it doesn't. Often these deals are risky for the acquirer. They come with a lot of fees. You're much better off as an individual investor if you want to get exposure to a good copper company. You can just buy a good copper company, and the best one on the ASX used to be Oz Minerals. I think there's a real lack of similar opportunities now. So overall, look, BHP, I wouldn't want to discourage anybody from holding that. Based on what I have to say, it's way outside my circle of competence. It just wouldn't give me, even if I did want to get that copper trend, and I thought copper was undervalued at the moment, BHP wouldn't give me even enough exposure just to that. I'd prefer just take a smaller position in some probably silly high risk copper producer that's a little bit down in the dumps, and then just ride that if we do get this call on the long term theme correct, which is of course another thing you can debate about, but I actually do believe that probably long-term copper does go up in price.
Okay, so that is a hold, I'm going to call it, from both of you guys.